Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of Bronx Bombers. My name is Joe Rubenstein and it is Wednesday, May 1st, and the Yankees, or rather the replacement Yankees, as I record this, are about to take the field against the D-backs in Arizona, Sabathia on the hill against Greinke. The Bombers continue a road trip in which they have gone 6-1, and that's after sweeping the Red Sox at home and then going 3-1 against the Royals in the Bronx. So all told, since last we spoke, the Yankees, with most of their team on the injured list, have won 11 of 13 games on the strength of tremendous starting pitching, Happ, Paxton, and Herman in particular, crisp infield defense, LeMahieu and Urshela in particular. Urshela I'll discuss on our Twitter poll. The insane production of Luke Voit, who we'll get into in our mailbag segment. Voit was just named Player of the Week on Monday after hitting .433 with 4 home runs and 10 RBIs, and his on-base streak stands at 38 games. And some of the other heroes on offense, Gary Sanchez with a mammoth grand slam on Saturday, and then a 2-run shot the next day that traveled even farther. I listened to the Giants broadcasters. They were like speechless. After that 2-run home run, I finally, one of them just said, that there's a big boy home run. Sanchez OPS over 1,100 now. The aforementioned Gio Urshela also outstanding with the bat in the last 7 days, hitting .440 with 6 RBIs, and whose season average stands at .351. And some nice contributions from Gleyber Torres, whose slump is officially busted, Thairo Estrada, one of the replacement infielders who appears to be a very good player, and newly acquired outfielder Cameron Maybin has also contributed. And, what a difference 2 weeks makes. And then the question becomes, what happens to this phenomenal team chemistry when the injured guys start to come back? I'll be honest, guys. Like I said, I really mean it. Other than the absence of Judge and Hicks, maybe, I like this team better. I like the defense. I like the ability to manufacture runs when the home run ball is not there. I like the team speed, and I like, not having to watch Stanton strike out and kill rallies on a regular basis. But look, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and I'll update you guys on all the injuries later as far as who's coming back when. But for now, just enjoy what you're seeing, guys. It's a brand of baseball that I've been advocating for a long time, and the results, they speak for themselves. The Yankees are one of the hottest teams in baseball, right there with the Dodgers and the Rays. You can follow us on Twitter, @BombersPodcast is the handle. You can also send us questions. We'll try to answer in our mailbag segment here on the podcast. You can like us on Facebook, subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher. We're on Spotify as well, and as always, you can send your comments and questions to us via Twitter or Facebook. Really, however you'd like to engage with us, we love engaging with you. Coming up a little bit later on in our Twitter poll this week, some interesting results when we asked if Gio Urshela should remain on the roster when Andujar returns. And I'll answer a fascinating question, actually a pair of questions, from one of our followers about Luke Voit. And in just a minute, we'll get into a few of my thoughts and some choice quotes from a brand new book about the Yankees' 2018 season called Inside the Empire, written by Bob Klapisch. All that and more coming up on today's Bronx Bombers. Back in a moment.
Bronx Bombers Trivia. Which of these 4 Yankee managers won the most playoff games? Was it A, Billy Martin, B, Buck Showalter, C, Joe Girardi, or D, Joe Torre? The answer coming up a little bit later in the podcast.
And now here's Joe with this week's main thing.
All right, so since there are so many injured Yankees, I thought I'd do a little public service announcement here about when each of them might be returning. Thankfully, it appears that DJ LeMahieu, who's rapidly becoming my favorite Yankee position player, I love him, and Gio Urshela are okay after getting nicked up in San Francisco, so here goes. Miguel Andujar still has a partially torn right labrum, but has decided not to have surgery, at least at this point, and he's playing in a rehab game in Tampa as I record this, and could rejoin the lineup this weekend in the Bronx against the Twins. Dellin Betances has a bad shoulder and has been getting cortisone injections, or at least one injection, and Boone said he's shown some significant improvement with his strength and range of motion. Take that that with like a heaping tablespoon of salt, though, because the Yankees have been misleading about these things in the past. Whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but we won't see Dellin Betances back probably until at least June. Now, Greg Bird, who nobody misses except maybe his immediate family and friends, has some sort of foot problem. At this point, they should just amputate, right? I mean, amputate the foot and get it over with, cut your losses. No, don't amputate. But Greg Bird's feet have been an absolute plague on the nation, and I think I can speak for all of Yankee Nation when I say that we have less than zero interest in ever hearing any more about Greg Bird's faulty feet ever again. So the deal is he's wearing a protective boot. He will be reevaluated soon, and, we'll see. My opinion, his career in Pinstripes is just about over. Now, Clint Frazier, on the other hand, is expected back by May 8th or 9th. He had a left ankle sprain, and after taking BP on the field and doing some throwing on Tuesday, fielded a few grounders in left. So the Yankees expect to ramp up his running the next couple of days as he continues to rehab, and Red Thunder is still hopeful to come off the injured list in about a week. Now, Didi, look, we don't know. I mean, recovery time from Tommy John definitely varies, and it varies between pitchers and position players. And he had the surgery in October, I believe, but his recovery, he says, has gone extraordinarily well. And, he and the Yankees say he'll be back this summer, so we'll see. I hope so. Aaron Hicks has a bad back, but he's also been getting some cortisone injections and maybe back by the end of May. Aaron Judge, we don't know. He strained his left oblique on April 20th, and Boone called it a pretty significant strain. So after the PR fiasco last year, when the Yankees said he'd be out 3 weeks after that fracture, and it was like a month and a half, the Yankees really aren't saying much at all about Aaron Judge this time, so can't really say. Luis Severino, a rotator cuff inflammation and lat strain, is recovering apparently at a snail's pace. He long tossed for weeks, but still has not progressed to throwing off a mound. So, best case scenario, I would say July for Sevy, and my feeling is later. I think it's not impossible that he won't pitch this year. Now, Stanton, who strained his bicep, injured himself during rehab, so his return is not imminent. I would say best case scenario, June 1st. Now, there's more on the injured list, but those are the main, important guys. And it's been a remarkable thing to see. I mean, it really has. And also remarkable is the phenomenal depth that Cashman has assembled that has really enabled this team to keep on keeping on in the face of just a tsunami of injuries. It's all those years of putting together this farm system has really paid off, and you're seeing it reap dividends right now. Which brings us to Inside the Empire, a book that I enjoyed. Now, after having, I followed literally every game last year. So the parts of the book that chronicle the events of last season and postseason were nothing new. So on that front, well written, yes, but less than edge of your seat reading for me personally. And there's another factor in a book of this nature, which is the Yankees are, and always have been, a very, very buttoned-down organization. Bob Klapisch, who wrote the book and who's a very well-regarded writer for the Bergen Record and USA Today, he also wrote a great book on the 92 Mets called The Worst Team Money Could Buy, highly entertaining book. But Klapisch, it took him 7 months to even get Hal Steinbrenner to sit down and talk to him, okay? And even then, Steinbrenner was surrounded by a phalanx of advisors. And almost no players would say much of anything, important on the record or off the record, really. A few things. And Cashman, Cashman's got a poker face and sort of talks around stuff when he wants to. But I did learn a few things. So what I'll do is I'll give you a list here of 6 choice nuggets with some quotes from the book. And if you're intrigued, pick it up. It's not a bad investment. So nugget number 1, which goes back a bit historically, but I thought it was very interesting. There was and is no love lost between Brian Cashman and Derek Jeter. In 2010, Jeter became a free agent for the first time, and his skills on both sides of the ball had showed significant decline. But he wanted like a max contract into his 40s, if you remember, and Cashman resisted that wisely. He offered, I think, $51 million for 3 years, an offer that was ultimately taken. And here's a quote that shows you that Cashman is just not a guy. He's a little guy, but he will not be intimidated by anyone, including legendary Hall of Fame players. So here's Cashman, quote, "Jeter sent messages through his agent that we were screwing him when no one was willing to pay what we offered. Cashman invited Jeter and his agent, Casey Close, to go out and shop the deal. In other words, to see if they could get a better deal than $51 million for 3 years. Jeter returned to the table smarting. No one had come close to the Yankees' bid. Casey Close, the agent, even suggested a stark concession for his client, a piece of either the Yes Network or the team." That's a little arrogant. So at the meeting, this is Cashman talking, at the meeting, Derek said, "What other shortstop would you want playing here?" And I started rolling off names. I got like 3 names down the list, and his agent said, "Stop, this is not productive." And then Derek got up and said, "You guys finish this. I don't want to go anywhere else, but I don't want to be in here either," unquote. So that relationship never really recovered from that incident. And in negotiations for Stanton a few years later, when Jeter was with the Marlins, he wouldn't even talk to Cashman. He delegated those conversations to a subordinate. So there's that. Nugget number 2 is that Cashman has utter and complete control of this team lock, stock, and barrel, and he is going nowhere. And that total control has its roots in the debacle of 2014, which is when Hal Steinbrenner splurged on a passel of high-priced free agents, 3, Jacoby Ellsbury, Carlos Beltran, and Brian McCann, and that team did not even get to the playoffs. Now, part of the problem back then was we still owed Teixeira, Sabathia, and A-Rod like a boatload of money. But after those 3 signings, which did not pan out, Cashman committed to building up the farm system. He got rid of Mark Newman, who was the farm director under George. And here's the quote. "Newman's successor, Gary Denbo, was empowered by Cashman to radically overhaul the minor league chain. Big sums were spent on sports science and analytics and the psychosocial training of young players." I don't know what that is, psychosocial, but whatever. "All baseball decisions now run through Cashman, though the team's 3 pillars, the head of analytics, scouting, and business affairs, have a seat at his conference table," unquote. So, occasionally Cashman does let himself be overruled by the analytics department, but this is his show. Steinbrenner writes the checks and handles other aspects of the Yankees organization, much of the marketing aspect. Hal Steinbrenner's made a great and very successful effort to market this team to millennials. And the Yankees, not breaking any news here, are just, a money-making Goliath. Okay, nugget number 3. And this is coming from Cashman, so take it with a grain of salt, but I happen to think that it is true. Girardi had essentially lost the clubhouse and made no effort to establish personal rapport with the players. Now, on Girardi's behalf, here's a quote that to me actually makes Girardi look good in retrospect, and it has to do with Gary Sanchez, whose defensive issues were legion last year, and who Klapisch says he calls Sanchez the closest thing on this team to a coach killer. Quote, "Sanchez, the brilliant but moody slugger, was brutal behind the plate in 2017. He posted league-worst stats in pass balls and errors, and was out of sync with his starters, notably Gray and Tanaka. Never the best receiver, he nosedived badly in the second half after dialing back his pregame catching work. He especially hated doing the wild pitch drill in which he'd flop to his knees and block hundreds of balls that his coach bounced in the dirt. At some point, he announced that he was done with that annoyance. Reluctantly, Girardi let it pass. If the manager put his foot down, he risked losing the kid's bat. So prone was his catcher to long sulks. That decision backfired in a slew of passed balls and muffled complaints from the starters. By August, Girardi had it with Sanchez, critiquing his defense to the press. What he said was not harsh, even by baseball terms. Quote, "It needs to improve, bottom line," unquote. But it was enough to blindside Cashman. Cashman decided then and there that Joe was gone. He wasn't about to tolerate needless drama, unquote. Come on. It needs to improve, bottom line. That's what Girardi said. To me, that is mild, exceptionally mild. and Sanchez was costing us games. But Cashman did not like those remarks from Girardi, and it was just another reason why he was going to let Girardi go last winter, which shocked Girardi, by the way. Girardi left that meeting in the Bronx almost in tears, and he immediately called Hal Steinbrenner to intercede on his behalf, which Hal declined to do, and the Yankees also did not like how Girardi handled the press in general. So that kind of tells you why Aaron Boone was hired. Okay, some quick nuggets on the players. Andujar and Gleyber Torres, who sort of got lumped together last year in our minds as the two phenom rookies, those two guys have personalities that are like polar opposites. Andujar is always smiling, he's dancing in the clubhouse, he's a chatterbox, and Torres is incredibly quiet, almost like monastic. Does not hang out with the team at all after games, just goes to his hotel room. Now, part of that, remember, Gleyber's home country, Venezuela, is like in a state of complete chaos right now. I mean, it's really on the verge of civil war, poverty and crime through the roof, and he has a lot of family there still. So he was very worried and remains very worried about that situation down there and is constantly calling to see if his family and friends are okay. So I thought that was interesting. It's important to remember that these guys are human beings with problems, especially the guys that come from really terrible parts of the world as far as quality of life and, political stuff. Now, Didi and Aaron Judge come off the best as human beings, just natural leaders who get what being a Yankee is all about, just good people. Now, Stanton has a bit of an edge to him, apparently, and he has a personality that's probably not cut out for New York, not cut out for our media environment here. He has no use for the press whatsoever, and after games, he just leaves as quickly as he can to go chill out with supermodels, and Klapisch calls him a, quote, very eligible bachelor, with the word very italicized, so read between the lines there, and Stanton's having a good time when he's not playing, which is, hey, God bless him. So 2 more quick points. As I said, the Yankees have gobs of money, not breaking any news there, and they are tagged as the evil empire, and that's fine, but they do in fact do something very, very nice and very important, I think, for each and every prospect that comes into our system, many of whom come from incredible poverty, as I said, like, dirt roads, no electricity, just terrible situations. And here I'll quote Klapisch, quote, 10% of these prospects will reach the majors, and only a fraction of those will stick around long enough to get vested in the Yankees pension plan. But for as long as they're in the Yankees chain, these kids are well served for their time. The Tampa life skills classes are repeated at every level of the minors, prepping players for baseball and beyond. And for all the kids who don't make the bigs, the Yankees have a bonus clause. They offer a college scholarship to every prospect who washes out of their system. No matter where they're from or where they pursue a future, the Yankees will pick up the tab for their college degree. I'm in touch with 30 or 40 guys who went home, and most of them do go on to college, says Melissa Hernandez. From there, they open their own businesses or go into teaching or other middle-class professions. What they don't do is go back to their father's farms, unquote. Melissa Hernandez, by the way, is the head instructor in Tampa, and the prospects there are taught financial skills, they're taught proper dietary choices, they are instructed in English, they are taught how to handle the press, and so that I found very positive and kind of moving. The Yankees are by no means obligated to provide college tuition for prospects who, wash out of their system, but they do. And I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, last quote I'll give you. The book's actually pretty harsh on Stanton, I would say, as a player. Yes and no. Klapisch makes clear that Stanton is an incredibly hard worker and he really cares. And he did have, I think he had 100 RBIs last year. But the book does not shy away from the fact, nor should it, that Stanton failed miserably in big spots in the playoffs, and the strikeouts were just brutal last year, record-setting, in fact. And so Klapisch had this to say, kind of a warning shot to Giancarlo Stanton, and these are points that I agree with wholeheartedly. Okay, so this is a long quote, but it has to do with the Red Sox series. Quote, "The difference between these two teams can be summed up in one sentence. The Red Sox signed J.D. Martinez, and the Yankees dealt for Stanton. Put Martinez, that resourceful, run-producing genius, in the 3-hole behind Hicks and Judge, and watch the parade of big innings and early blowouts. Now, slot Stanton after Betts and Benintendi, and see how many of those 5-run rallies never happen. Strikeouts are not the cost of doing business in this game. They are the margin of error between a championship team and one that bows out early. Unproductive at-bats with runners on base crippled the team all season long. Yes, they were out-everythinged by the Red Sox. But lest you forget, 2 of those 4 games were winnable one-run losses. What if Stanton had not struck out with the bases full in Game 1? Or whiffed with 2 aboard and no one out in the 9th inning of Game 4? We'll never know, but the sample size will grow. These Yankees will be in the playoffs for years to come. Will Sanchez figure out what he was doing wrong at the plate and regain his stature as one of the game's more feared hitters? Does Stanton, who signed for 9 more seasons at a pricey $240 million, become a more disciplined hitter in 2019? Or does he stand on his brand as a one-man wrecking crew and dare the fans and the media to come after him? Because as day follows night, there's going to be hell to pay if he has a couple more postseasons like this one. This town is not Miami, and those folks in the stands are not kindly old widows and snowbird golfers. Just ask A-Rod what life can be like when the crowd turns against you in the Bronx. George Steinbrenner had it wrong, you see. This town doesn't love stars. This town loves the ones who actually deliver, unquote. True that. Back in a moment.
And now the answer to today's Bronx Bombers trivia question. Which Yankee manager won the most playoff games? The answer? D. Joe Torre. And now, here's Joe with this week's Twitter poll.
Yes, this week's Twitter poll results are in. We asked you this. When Andujar returns from the injured list, should Gio Urshela remain with the big club or be sent down? And 76% of our followers on Twitter at Bombers Podcast said he should stay, and 24% said send him down. And to those 24%, I say, I'm not 100% sure, but it's possible that you are insane. This kid has shown every conceivable indication of being big league material. I love him. Manager Bruce Bochy of the Giants was just raving about him on Sunday. Bochy, who is a class act and has 3 rings with the Giants, said this, quote, Urshela looks like a really nice player on both sides of the ball. He knows how to play the game, and that's the thing. This team plays the game right. They score runs because they execute. I watched their series against the Angels. This is a club that is getting the big hit, executing. That's why they're on this roll. I love it when teams play the game and don't just rely on the home run. These kids on the Yankees, they look like they belong, unquote. To which I say, amen, brother. And he's right. And Urshela, I gave his stats at the top of the podcast, but for those of you who may not be familiar with his past, he's 27 years of age, so he's not a young prospect, and he also did not come up in our system. He originally signed with the Indians as an international free agent in 2008. He's from Colombia originally. Played mostly in Cleveland's minor league system, then was traded to the Blue Jays last year, exactly a year ago, in fact, and then traded to the Yankees last August for cash. And like Luke Voit, who's around the same age, Gio, or Don Giovanni, I like to call him, is finally getting his shot in the majors, and he's sure made the most of it. I mean, just a dynamic player, terrific fielder at a crucial position, obviously, and as bad as Andujar has been defensively, Gio has been that good, and just a bona fide contact hitter, which I love. So to me, given, first of all, that Andujar is an awful fielder, and that awfulness may in fact be exacerbated by a torn labrum in his throwing arm, I would DH Andujar, I would keep Urshela at third, and when Stanton comes back, stick him in the outfield, which, he did that for a decade in Miami. I mean, why not use him there? He's not a bad outfielder. And so you keep Voit at first, obviously. He's actually shown signs of improvement defensively. And then you've got a Gold Glover at second in LeMahieu, Glaber at short, and Urshela at third. What's not to like? I mean, sure, his stats may start to normalize, but I don't think this is a mirage, guys. The guy can play. And so I'm with the 76% very strongly. Keep Don Giovanni in pinstripes. I mean, let me ask you a question and answer it honestly. Is it a very nice thing not to have to hold your breath every time a ground ball goes to third base? Is that a nice thing? I thought so. All right, from this week's mailbag, our question of the week here on Bronx Bombers comes from Terry in Bayonne. He has 2, actually. And by the way, you can find us on Twitter at Bombers Podcast is the handle. Send me a DM if you have any questions you want to have us answer on any future episodes. We are more than happy to do so. And Terry writes, I have 2 questions. Do you believe Luke Voit is for real, or is it still too small a sample size to make that judgment? And also, I saw that Luke Voit follows the same pro-Trump account on Instagram that Nick Bosa does. Do you find that problematic? Okay, well, let's dispose of the second question first. Now, I haven't actually verified this business about Voit following, a pro-Trump account on Instagram because, frankly, I have a life and I couldn't care less. But if true, the answer as to it being problematic is no. I mean, at least on my end. I mean, Terry mentions Nick Bosa. For those of you who don't follow football, Nick Bosa is an exceptional pass rusher out of Ohio State who was just picked number 2 in the draft by the 49ers. Smart pick. As smart as the Giants were dumb. I mean, come on. Daniel Jones at 6? Come on, man. They could have had Josh Allen. I mean, thank God I'm a Jets fan. I mean, the Giants they're a proud franchise with a great history, but just in the last few years, they've become kind of a laughingstock. I mean, I don't know if it's Gettleman or the Maras, but something stinks in that front office. But anyway, Nick Bosa, defensive end, now in San Francisco, is, he's apparently a conservative and a Trump supporter, as many people are. So look, I don't do politics on this show. It's not what it's about. But no, Terry, honestly, I don't care at all who any individual Yankee supports for president or about their political views at all. And frankly, an athlete clicking like or follow or whatever it is on some Instagram account or having political views which, I assume differ from yours is not a crime. So no, it's not problematic. But what I do find problematic, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Terry, but people do this now, this business of combing through athletes' social media posts for like years back and then hanging it around their necks on draft day, that's just really kind of juvenile, it's counterproductive, and frankly, I think a little cruel. And honestly, does every last segment of our culture need to be politicized all the time, really? I mean, I think there's too much of that, and it's become kind of toxic, and certainly social media has a lot to do with it. Social media, there's a lot of information, a lot of pseudo-information, and a lot of rage, frankly, and precious little, wisdom or grace there. So what Voit clicks on in his spare time does not interest me. I don't view it as any of my business, and Voit, by all accounts, is very well liked in the Yankees clubhouse, so no problems there. But let's talk about Luke Voit, the player, and what he's done. I mean, Voit, who a year ago was playing for AAA Memphis, acquired from the Cardinals in a Houdini-like feat of magic by Brian Cashman for Chasen Shreve and Giovanni Gallegos and a few bucks. And, what value this guy has given us. I mean, I mentioned earlier, he's been on base for 38 straight games. He leads the team with 25 RBIs. That's actually second in the American League behind only Seattle's Domingo Santana. Voigt's OPS now over 1,000, 8 home runs, 17 walks, and he's been the center of this offensive attack with Judge and Stanton and until recently Sanchez all injured. And he's a joy to watch. I mean, enthusiastic, got that 1,000-watt smile. I love the little hop he does when he knows he just parked one. And he's become a fan favorite, and for good reason. And there was some talk this winter that maybe, he was another Shane Spencer. Spencer came up one summer and just destroyed everything he saw from major league pitchers. And then he never really followed through in later years. And Voit last season in 39 games with the Yankees hit .333 with a 1095 OPS, and he's, if anything, better this year. And by the way, making a grand total of $573,000, okay? So taking up nothing on the payroll. He's under team control next season, and then he's arbitration eligible for the 3 years following that. And so Luke Voit is not going to be a free agent until 2024. So that flapping sound you hear is from the wings of a bird named Greg flying off into the sunset, I think for good. I mean, Luke Voit is very much the real deal, Terry. He's been handed an opportunity here and he seized it. He's earned the job and it's great. And guys, don't be surprised if you see him suit up for the American League at the All-Star game out in Cleveland on July 9th. He really has been that good. But if you're listening, Luke, avoid the home run derby at all costs. Kiss of death. But thanks for the question, Terry. Appreciate it. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Bronx Bombers. Again, don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, find us on Spotify, follow us on Twitter, @BombersPodcast is the handle, like us on Facebook as well, and thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you again on May 15th.